School Wars!
There's only one way to differentiate real weebs from casual tourists, and that is, have you watched harem anime? And as a slightly more casual anime enjoyer, bro's lying, he's a weeb, I need to say that yes, I have watched my fair share of pre-isekai shitty harem slop, and yeah, it's not good at all. So the big problem with harem anime is that it's super cringe and low quality slop with constant romance edging and rage baiting. I mean, Gotobun still edges you pretty hard. It's literally part of the genre, I guess. But the edging is good, and I'll explain to you why. Wait, what? I'm very happy to announce that Gotobun no Hanayome is not your typical harem slop, and is in fact the only harem anime worth watching. And I mean only, cause there's literally nothing else that comes close. So it has been 3 years since the final movie ended, and yes, I am very late with this one, but recently I just finished all 122 chapters of the manga, so I really wanted to talk about this again. And so the premise is simple. 5 identical sisters flunked their test in their old school and transferred to a new one to basically hard reset. But then they flunked their exams again, so their super rich father hires dear Futaro as their tutor, who just happens to be their schoolmate. At the start, they mostly dislike Futaro, and Futaro finds them incredibly difficult to deal with. But then the girl's dad is like, yo, take some bags, you need to pay off the family debt. So Chadman MC gets into the grind and spends the first half of the show trying to get the girls to accept him. And of course, this being high school rom-com, the girls eventually fall for him and spend the second half of the show fighting over him. Sounds like a very cliche and common plotline in anime rom-com, right? And I have to agree on that, but what separates this from the shows that come before is the level of character depth that we are introduced to, the internal struggles, the unique characteristics that separate each identical sister. We learn about Miku's insecurities and see her learn to embrace herself. We see Ichika assume an elder sister role at the start of the show, but break down at the end when push came to shove. We see Nino learn to express her love directly and go from being an overprotective tsundere mummy to a straight-up nikushoku joshi dummy mummy. Wait, what am I even saying? We see intrinsic character growth across most of the characters, most of which are very much fleshed out, making these characters very much believable and relatable. And even in our male lead, we see significant character growth, which as veteran rom-com enjoyers will know, was unheard of in these kind of shows before Gotobun was a thing. Harem MCs prior to him looks like this, and behaves like this, but bro actually has character traits of his own. He starts off as an awkward, egoistic student who only ever scores hundreds on his test, inserting himself into the girls' lives so that he can maintain that tuition bag. But eventually starts helping the girls because he genuinely cares for them, losing his spot as top student in the final exam arc just to get the girls to pass. He ultimately becomes less of a die-hard, single-purpose academic weapon and more of a well-rounded, human, who actually has friends and a life beyond his studies. Yeah, this is a fictional story because people like this don't exist in Asia. I love Gotobun so much, I have Nino on my phone case, and I would love to keep glazing it to the moon and back over and over again for the rest of this video. But it's time to get to the part that most of you are probably waiting for. It's time to address its biggest flaw, the elephant in the room, Itsuki. I mean the ending. So for those of you who remember, it was rather controversial, or even bad as some would argue. But let me give you my take on it. So this is a harem anime, right? So you might expect all the discourse to be just best girl wars, but rather more than that, it's more about the strange writing choice made by the writer Negi Haruba that kinda threw everyone off, whether intentional or not. First, let me set things straight with how I view the outcomes of all the main girls. Ichika was a well fleshed out character that had good romantic tension with Futaro, but was never a choice since she had to become the villain in the later part of the show. Nina is a fan favorite, but wasn't really going to be the one just by, how her character was set up and not having that much chemistry with Futaro. I feel like Futaro is mostly just taking her abuse and trying to put up with her and not really, reciprocating much feelings back. Like, he even gets awkward, when having to deal with Nino's very upfront pursuance. Miku is the most developed character and also possibly the most popular character. But for a satisfying end to a character arc, she could not be the winner. Futaro brought Miku out of her shell and helped her gain confidence in herself, but part of that confidence was also tied to Futaro being there for her. So letting go of Futaro was necessary to show that she had learned to love herself for who she is without anyone else's support, thereby completing her character arc. And so now, I will talk about the elephant in the room. Hamburger. I mean Itsuki. So Itsuki fits more tropes of main girl than the other girls with how she was the first to be introduced, was the first to have proper disagreement with Futaro, she had the most interactions with his family, and is the last to accept his tutoring, and overall having more edges to round off between them in terms of their relationship. Their dynamic has the most potential for growth, and they even have some very similar personality traits. Heck, she even aspires to become a teacher after speaking to Futaro, who's literally her teacher, bruh. Like, they got chemistry. Plot-wise, she made the most sense too, having the most connection with Futaro at the start, and being the last to realize her feelings for Futaro. Having her ultimately end up with Futaro would have been a very natural progression and a good tie-up to her character arc, given her friction with Futaro at the start. And in their disagreements, Futaro and Itsuki hold equal grounds and can fight at equal levels without holding back, which is quite unlike for, say, Nino, where Futaro basically gets stepped on and bullied by her. God, I wish that was me! It's a pity Haruba kind of forgot about her midway through the series, because more character development would have made her a really good character, and developing her into main girl would have been very natural. But of course, he left her out because he had other intentions for the series, because Itsuki was essentially a decoy protagonist. Well, at least at the start. Enter Yotsuba. Haruba making Yotsuba the winning girl in the end kind of made sense, given that she was the one who always got along with Futaro, had always been in the background helping him, and had a personality very much complementary to his. A lot of times, it's Yotsuba helping out Futaro bring the girls together, and Yotsuba probably gives him the least problems to fix. But this was precisely the issue. Almost nothing happened between the two of them. There were no major conflicts, no observable changes of heart towards each other, and barely any development between the two of them until the ending. While there was an arc about Futaro and Yotsuba going out once, it was not enough to show any real romantic tension, and even slightly out of place, like almost like a forced plotline to provide a bit of foreshadowing to the later part. It also didn't help that Yotsuba and Futaro were the ones who met at the shrine in Kyoto when they were kids, because it meant that Yotsuba was already in love with Futaro at the start, and there was going to be little development for feelings throughout this 122 chapter manga. Knowing the outcome since I watched the anime before reading the manga, it was easier to spot the hints Haruba dropped in my second time experiencing the series, but it ultimately wasn't enough. And that leaves first-time readers and watchers kinda thrown off when the winning girl is revealed, you know? Like, it's to the extent that the audience, like myself included, was expecting another plot twist after the winning girl was chosen. Like, damn, what kind of harem anime does that? Bro got us so good, for real, for real. So this kinda sucks, cause most of the show was pretty good. But unfortunately, romance anime is about characters growing on one another, right? And a plot twist like this doesn't really work for a genre like that. Relationship development is super important, but we don't follow it enough for Yotsuba's case. Itsuki would have been an acceptable choice for subverting expectations. After being main girl at the start and then sidelined for the second half of the show, making a comeback at the end would have been satisfactory for the audience. Okay, so after glazing this show like a sugar-coated donut, throwing it on the ground and taking a shit on it, it's time for me to pick it up and shove it all into my mouth, because despite my own feces smearing it like chocolate icing, it's still very sweet and yummy on the inside. Okay, that was a very bad transition, I'm sorry. Anyway, while some parts of the show were rushed or slightly forced, and the ending was questionable, it was clearly intentional by the writer, and it starts very successful in the sense that it subverts most expectations and tropes, and really leaves an impression on the reader or watcher. This show manages to keep the resolution well under wraps throughout the show, urging you to keep going to learn more about the story. Gotoban was clearly a deconstruction of the harem genre, and really nailed it on that point. This is not copium, I swear, Itsuki! Yotsuba as a character in theory fits very well with Futaro's personality, and the reasoning Haruba gives for them ending up together also ties the story up okay, and plays into the supposed mystery aspect of the series. But ultimately, it doesn't matter which girl gets chosen by the MC, because this series is really about the sisters' growth as characters above all else. The main charm of the story is in the relationships between the sisters, their complicated feelings, and ultimately sisterly love for one another that gives the show so much heart and soul. From all of them uniting against a common enemy, Futaro, at the start, to accepting him as part of their family, then turning on each other in their battle for his feelings before eventually rounding it off with a very satisfying reunion through mutual understanding and appreciation. Like, damn, like that is peak character development right there. I absolutely love their dynamics so much. Not many rom-com stories leave such an impression on me, and Gotoban is one of the few that truly did. It's strangely endearing and makes you love all the characters regardless. This show was and still is very popular, at least in Japan, spawning lots of merch, doujins, and more notably, official spin-off media projects. There's a VN that lets you experience endings outside of the canon Yotsuba route, a bunch of titles on multiple platforms including a gacha puzzle game, a rather strange VR game that lets you experience some scenes from Futaro's POV. Also, I find it pretty funny that after dropping Gotoban, my bro Haruba went on to make a Super Sentai-ass series with, well, 5 main rangers? So is Gotoban still relevant in the big 2026? Yes, very much. I feel like this series set a new standard for this specific niche within the rom-com genre. The shonen harem genre in general has only seen garbage in the decade prior to Gotobu's arrival. So yeah, this will be a future classic that us angst status weeps will rave to about the new gens in the coming future. Like, damn, you kids have it so good now with the main characters getting together on episode 1. Back in my day, we had to get romance edged so hard only to get mocked in the last second by the least developed character. Yes, I'm still coping with my losses. Justice for my girl Itsuki!